our Uncle Ted reference for the day, as
Yep.
audio issues attempted to prevent us from experiencing the greatness that we were about to experience. But fortunately, the good old power cycle fixes all. Turn it off and turn it back on again. They took forever for me to reboot because I have like ADHD brain, so I'll like open something up and then I'm like, oh, I don't have time to deal with that right now. So I've got probably something like 20 different Chrome windows open, each with multiple tabs, and a bunch of those are YouTube videos that I've bookmarked to watch. So when I restart everything, I have to go through and open every one and pause all those videos, or there's just this cavalcade of sound just pouring out at me.
like opening up a MySpace profile back in the day. You probably don't know anything about that.
Yeah, there you go. There's a callback.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember. I'm not that young. The old man.
Okay.
All right. So Tho, you guys know Tho. You've unless you just were like born yesterday or something, if you've been following this channel for any amount of time, you know who Tho Bishop is. And he's a great dude, and he's got a good message to share for us. He's got a gospel to preach to us today. And he reached out to us and told us that Murray Rothbard and Justin Raimondo have some really interesting a really interesting take on James Burnham. And for those of you who don't know who James Burnham is, he was actually one of his books was very influential in Stephen and I initially like meeting each other and starting to talk and eventually launching this podcast. James Burnham wrote the book The Machiavellians, Defenders of Power, I think is what it's called.
Freedom.
And Defenders of Freedom. Yeah. Freudian slip. So so full disclosure, I've read The Machiavellians probably 3 or 4 times at this point. I've read The Managerial Revolution, which is another very good book by Burnham. I've read about half of it, I think, and I haven't gotten all the way through it. I was going down an NRX rabbit hole when I stumbled across Eastern Orthodoxy, and then I've been just going down a deep Eastern Orthodox apologetics and all kinds of stuff rabbit hole lately. So I wanted to try to read some of Managerial Revolution before we did this show, but I just didn't have time to get to it. But
the good thing is it's actually required reading when you ascend up the ladder at Chick-fil-A, actually. So
yeah.
that's really why when Tho messaged us about this, that I was so excited, because it takes me back to the days of my pleated khakis ordering small school children around. So,
peak performance of a theocratic state.
Yeah. Well, it is our pleasure today then to bring to you Tho Bishop, and he's gonna tell us about what Justin Raimondo and Murray Rothbard had to say about James Burnham. So Tho, take it away.
Yeah, well, again, it's always glad to join you guys. Always a lot of fun. And I got really excited when I stumbled upon this old Triple R article last week called The Franciscan Way, because I thought your audience in particular would find some interest in it because of how much you've kind of gone down the Burnham rabbit hole. And Burnham's work I found interesting since, I've been in that, rediscovering, this sort of work the last few years myself. And it's kind of interesting that, here you have kind of populist right Twitter rediscovering the work of a contemporary of Mises and Rothbard. He's been in that National Review camp. Excuse me. He's been in that National Review camp. So what about him is kind of subversive in a way to that would make him attractive at all to people not happy with kind of this neoconservative, neoliberal status quo? And of course, when you dive into kind of what makes Burnham unique is that he really was kind of that true Machiavellian political scientist relative to an era full of what Rothbard describes as kind of moralists. And this led to some criticism of Rothbard and Raimondo. And I think some of it is justified and worthwhile diving into, in particular because one of the other writers that has become kind of popular within, let's call it the more intellectual side of the populist right, is Sam Francis. And so if you listen to someone like Pedro Gonzalez, who I think is better read than a lot of other pundits out there kind of in this new right sort of environment, he talks about Francis as much as he does about Burnham. And Francis himself was a bit of a protege of Burnham. What I think is interesting, though, and this is what Rothbard praises about him in this article, is that Francis kind of had a rooting side into these battles of power, Whereas the critique from Raimondo and Rothbard and kind of the Paleoliberatorian side was that Burnham was kind of too in love with power. Instead of making sure that his side benefited from a power battle, he just wanted to make sure that he was on the right side of whoever won that power battle. And one of the ways that his influence on the American political scene really resonated was less the work of the managerial revolution, who Rothbard actually praises a lot of the insights there. And I think there's a lot of interesting overlap with, say, sort of, Mises's critique of bureaucracy and the independent government. I think there's a lot of good stuff there that has direct value. What they would say is that, it's kind of hard to tell at times whether Burnham thinks the managerial revolution is good and bad. And I think that's a fair reading. He's just kind of describing it as is. Whereas Francis kind of takes that sort of framework of the Machiavellians and tries to identify ways in which sort of that old American ideal, not ideological, but kind of, that hardworking farmer with a barn that has a painted on American flag, what he would call the kind of the radicals of middle America. He's trying to apply Burnham's ideas into an actual strategy for what it then was. There's always a new right, depending on the genre. It's the new right of the 80s. And again, I think there's some interesting takeaways from kind of Rothbard diving into these scholars, because again, what is old is new again. And so again, we now have a kind of an 8,000 word article that has been largely overlooked that kind of dives into a lot of the energy and populist right Twitter right now. And that's why I think it's kind of an interesting thing to talk about. And that's why I'm happy to bring it onto your show.
Well, that's great. Just so people know, what is
Twitter recently with you?
We're going to take back the streets in this stream right here.
Man, I spent minutes photoshopping Tho's face onto a photo of Travis Bickle, and it got nothing. I was so disappointed. But I've got to say, you make a really good Travis Bickle if you're ever looking for a Halloween costume.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay.
Never too early for Halloween.
Yeah. Exactly. Or too late. Just so people know what is you referred to Triple R, just so people know what exactly is Triple R.
So that's the Rothbard Walk Report, which was kind of the political wing of the Rothbard Walk-Rail project in the 90s. You still have the Mises Institute. That was kind of the cornerstone for economic ideas and libertarian sort of scholarship. But the Rothbard Walk Report was a lot of great, very punchy political commentary of the day. And again, what was interesting was the degree to which Rothbard swam in the circles of the Pat Buchanans, of the Paul Gottfrieds, of the Sam Francises. And what's kind of interesting is that Sam Francis, among some of the others, far more so than, say, Pat Buchanan, though they tried to attack him similarly, is that Francis of that group is the one that kind of got the most canceled. Again, what is old is new again. The name at the time that brought down Sam Francis was actually Dinesh D'Souza. He was at an American Renaissance event, and he reported in the Washington Times about a comment that that Francis made about, it was a very racially tinged sort of comment. And that Dinesh D'Souza writing about Sam Francis in the Washington Post got Sam Francis canceled from the Washington Times. He maintained with some other sort of old conservative organizations from then on out. But again, that's kind of another interesting curveball there, because Rothbard's praising here is prior to that cancellation. And again, this is kind of something that just comes up, like it or not, with a lot of these sort of paleo-conservative thinkers. Some of them kind of did not age well in terms of our new senses of racial egalitarianism in America.
Yeah, when you see the comments that D'Souza was passing on, and he was not all that charitable in the way that he interpreted Francis's remarks, but at the same time, especially nowadays, like back then, you could see someone saying something like that and not recognizing, not anticipating being canceled the way that Francis was. But nowadays, it would just be you cannot say in public the types of things he was saying, but they weren't. He was. It was kind of like what you were saying about Burnham, that he was making a descriptive analysis,
right,
and not necessarily being prescriptive in it. But it's interesting there. So you get the mainstream normicon ultimately functioning as a gatekeeper, or is ultimately like they're only able to ever punch right. The only time that they ever make effective punches is when they punch right. Anytime that they're punching left, it's always like, mindless, vapid flailing. But if they're going to do something effective, they ultimately serve as the foot soldiers for the regime.
And typically they're canceling people for views that would have been relatively mainstream 20 years ago.
Right.
Again, it doesn't make them right, but like it would not have been out of character 20 years prior for, these sort of conversations to be perfectly normal. And but again, and now you have Dinesh D'Souza as the far right radical racist, black round face of white supremacy. And so there's something to be said there about getting better with age. I don't know.
Yeah, irony abounds. Yeah,
I thought that was one thing that really like stuck out about reading both Burnham books is that, however on the market, and I think for the time that he was writing, it's pretty impressive to knock out two like that. But I wonder if there's a certain freedom in. He seems like he doesn't ever have, and I didn't know if I was missing it, but he doesn't seem like he really ever is too concerned with anything prescriptive.
Right.
And I wonder if that just really allows you to just kind of be sort of observer of what is,
Yeah, it's kind of like the mold bug thing, where he's not is allergic to anything, right? He's trying to, as a good philosopher, he's trying to understand. I do know, like, that there is Raimondo has a book, Reclaiming the American Right, that Rothbard mentions in there, is coming out about the same time. He's got a full chapter dedicated to Burnham as well. And it's interesting there because it's again a lot more than this, because the purpose of this particular article was more about Sam Francis's work. But Raimondo's critique is very interesting because he'll compare different states. Like Burnham would make geopolitical statements, and so his commentary beyond kind of what was happening in kind of the growing broad rise of statism, which is kind of where Rothbard and Raimondo praise Burnham the most, is that he recognized that it wasn't communism versus the free world, right? That everything was a lifting tide of statism. He's and he's highlighting the similarities in some ways between like the Nazi regime and kind of what the Soviets are trying to do. He thinks this at some points he thinks the Nazis are going to be more successful than the Soviet Union. He predicts the collapse early on that didn't happen until much later. But he captures this understanding broadly. And that's something that I think a lot on the right ignored, and or at least rhetorically ignored, perhaps intentionally preserved. And that goes where, to again, some of the biggest critiques of Burnham's sort of impact on American politics was, again, unfortunately, not this better understanding of how institutions work and therefore preparing the American right to deal with those takeovers from the left, but it's rather his emphasis on the importance of building a global American regime to box in and to take apart the Soviet Union that he recognized. So basically the idea is that if America doesn't create this global empire, then the alternative is the Soviets coming in and creating their own global empire. And that, so therefore it's either us win or they win. And Rothbard, there's some critiques there, which I think particularly when you kind of get into some of the economic side of things, some of them might be relevant to the China issues and kind of, is China really a threat to take over America's place in the world, or does their economy not allow it? Similar sort of concerns from analysis from the Rothbardian side about the Soviets then. But again, it's interesting how I think there's so many parallels, right or wrong, then to now. And again, it's just fun to see how people from the Rothbardian orbit actually interacted with this stuff.
So I'll reveal a little bit of my ignorance about Burnham the man beyond just reading his most prominent work. So obviously he was a Trotskyist. So he's coming from a globalist communist background,
right.
the permanent revolution background. That's like his wiring. That's where he's coming from. And so then he wound up becoming kind of like the father of the neocons. But I suspect, like, if you took Burnham today, if you were able to resurrect him today and show him the world as it is today, I get the sense that he would be horrified at what neoconservatism is today. How much of do you agree with that, number one? And then how much of his error was a matter of him kind of going through a conversion experience, so to speak, and he's like encountering a new view of the world and trying it on and trying to make predictions with it and then failing? Or do you think he was ultimately really ideologically married to the neoconservatism he wound up kind of founding?
Yeah, I don't think it was necessarily like an ideologue in that sense at all. I think that it's interesting. George Orwell actually has a critique of Burnham, which is kind of interesting because it's George Orwell, and kind of he critiques Burnham as being, he's worshiping power, right? And so and so therefore what that leads to in terms of your intellectual conclusions is a bias towards whatever is happening now, whatever is successful now, is what's going to continue to happen. And so what he did not see was kind of big shifts and the black swan events, if you will, that kind of, he's kind of was trying to analyze what was working now, why it was working now, and what would lead to it continuing to work in the future. As to how he would feel about the modern day, I think just about anyone writing, anyone from the American 50s and 60s, you teleport them into 2020 and they'd be absolutely horrified with the state of the regime. And maybe that would have gotten him to kind of where Sam Francis was, right? Where he's trying, he has a rooting interest in who ends up winning this power vacuum. Or maybe he would be a behavioral economist today. I don't know. But I think that his history though is fascinating because again, he wasn't simply, it's unique to have a figure, I think, of the importance of Burnham have work rediscovered with a very subversive bent. And that's what makes Burnham so fascinating because he was not a Rothbard where he was playing from the sides and trying to take down, trying to play that Revolutionary War role. He always had positions of tremendous influence. He was never a nobody, as soon as he became professional. And yet there is now this entire value in understanding his ideas because of how little they were actually baked into the movement that he was nominally positioned as a leader of. And I think that's kind of unique, at least with a lot of some of the intellectuals of the 20th century.
It's funny how you keep seeing this phenomenon where the I guess like the followers or the descendants of a man wind up being better than the man himself. So the Trumpers are better than Trump. I know you've said that a lot. And then so you might even say that the Burnhamites, if those are a thing, the Burnhamites are better than Burnham. I'd never been personally invested that much in Burnham himself. I just found his analysis really interesting. And then I started reading the book knowing actually nothing about him. And I think I finished the Machiavellians before I ever started looking up Burnham or trying to figure out where this person came from. And I was really surprised to find someone who seemed to have such a clear-eyed view of the world, being able to kind of cut through the propagandistic BS and be able to really get right to the heart of the machinations of power. I was kind of surprised to find out that this guy was wound up being, on the kind of a chummy with Buckley. I was like, that doesn't seem like I would expect him to see him as a total bullshit maven. Like that's how I would have expected him to see Buckley. So that was when I saw that, I was like, well, that's really interesting.
He probably did though, right? Don't you get the idea? Maybe like that is how he saw him, despite being like chummy with him.
Was that a Machiavellian relationship?
Well, I think Buckley's influence in America, I don't think can be overstated because, again, like it or not, that's kind of the problem is that, and this kind of feeds into their critique, since Rothbard and Raimondo are kind of the best Buckley bashers out there, is that they have a lot of kind of begrudging respect for the power of what the National Review was able to accomplish, because from their perspective, what Buckley and Burnham were able to accomplish was completely hijacking a old political tradition, the infrastructure of the American right, and turning it from an isolationist America First movement into into being the advocates and the cheerleaders and the defenders of the global American empire. And they viewed the global American empire as a necessity to stop the Soviet Union and the threat of communism to the free world. And so again, from their perspective, like they are the heroes. But I think they're pretty, again, and they were good at what they did. That's why we're picking up the pieces. But I think it was a sincere relationship, and I think a lot of this kind of that's where you get into some of the fun things about the degree to which the State Department and the CIA, were directly had a role in the rise of Buckley, and his colleagues in the National Review. And again, it's worth just mentioning that there's a lot of libertarians that are perfectly fine with that. I mean, Henry Hazlitt was a National Review contributor. Ludwig von Mises had a good relationship with Buckley. And so there were many people who were anti-communists in kind of this libertarian sense that thought that this powerful infrastructure that was being created in this conservative movement, inspired by Buckley and supported by Burnham, was a useful tool of reversing sort of the New Deal excesses and trying to restore that old American Republic. What Francis's work is interesting, though, is because what he's doing is he's critiquing. He's asking the question: why did Buckley's side and Burnham's side not really win after Reagan was elected in the way that your average conservative person thought victory looked like? And it was great for, again, the Cold War side of things, but that was not really the main motivating thing for a lot of conservatives. And so what Sam Francis is doing is applying a political power-related analysis to the failings of Buckley's success. And again, that's why I think his commentary really, there's a lot of fascinating stuff here. And again, this is why you kind of get to this era in the 90s where Rothbard starts putting so much intellectual attention to strategies for political victory. And this was the stuff that had historically been kind of reserved to the National Review. He does praise the work of some National Review populist writers in his kind of comparison it to some of the work of Francis. And again, that's where, again, that's been has historically the weakest part of the libertarian movement is that there hasn't been more engagement in that political science strategy side of things that Burnham and by extension Francis did, and Francis inspired Rothbard.
Yeah, every time somebody starts getting into the talking about political science or the machinations of power, that sort of thing, the inner Lulbert comes out and people start getting all squeamish and which isn't entirely undue necessarily, because especially in the post World War II era, after seeing those levels of atrocity, it's made people, it's like on a DNA level, on a genetic level, basically anybody in the world now, but especially Westerners, have an immediate aversion to the idea of people explicitly scheming for power. The liberal notion has really seeped into all of us. That era, from maybe 19, kind of, I guess, like post World War I, so like 1920 to like 1950 is one of the most fascinating eras to me, and that was what really got me down this whole kind of winding road to winding up, I guess, where I am now as I continue down this winding road. One of the most transformative books for me personally was the book The Brothers, about the Dulles brothers, written by Stephen Kinzer, and understanding where they came from, their background as being children of a Christian minister and grandsons of a missionary, a Christian missionary. And they saw communism as for them, it wasn't the economics of it so much as it was the Satanism of it. I think it's difficult for us looking back now, being kind of so steeped in atheism as we are now. It's difficult for us to fully appreciate them and their sensibilities, and seeing this radical atheist movement that's beginning to expand across the globe. Globalism or all the evils of neoconservatism and all this stuff now that we're very intimately familiar with, that gives us that knee-jerk response away from that. That was heretofore unknown for those people at that time. They didn't have a full appreciation of all the dangers associated with that. And so it was very easy, I think, for a bunch of true believers to be subverted and led astray by just a couple of bad eggs, kind of. So you get the whole like Robert Taft conservatism that got subverted and taken over by this neoconservative impulse, which was driven by on one hand an ideological aversion to the atheism of communism, but those very guys, the guys who were involved in building out the military industrial complex apparatus, were also the Sullivan and Cromwell crowd. So they had a distinct personal economic interest in expanding all of these sorts of, free trade. It's important that we don't allow communism. For that, communism was a nationalist movement back then. So to them, communism was threatening to, number one, religiously, like undermine the religious fiber of the nations, but also all of these wealthy lawyers, businessmen, all the highfalutin part of society, they depended so much financially on major corporations in these foreign countries to sound, I'm going to sound like a leftist saying this, but just like robbing these countries of their natural resources and building our country on the backs of them. And so you get this merging of interests there, where people are terrified of an atheist movement that seems like this might be the coming of the Antichrist. And then also those running in those same circles are these, rich socialites who are like, well, we don't want to have our goose that kills the golden egg killed. So we need to step in and maintain global free trade. We need to ensure that people are not able to nationalize their resources.
Oh, and what's fun is that Rothbard dives directly on that point too. Like, he even mentions it in this article, where like he criticizes Sam Francis for not being kind of ruthless enough in his analysis, because he points out that the Dulles brothers effectively controlled foreign policy in the U.S. for multiple administrations, and that they were the attorneys for Standard Oil.
Yes.
And so in his entire perspective of like 20th century American politics, so this is true, it plays out in his book, The Origins of the Federal Reserve, Wall Street, the Federal Reserve and Foreign Policy, or something like that. Plays out in the progressive era some, is that he basically says that 20th century American politics is simply a game being played between the Morgan family and the Rockefeller family. And that every single president of the era can be traced directly to one of those two players.
Yeah.
And so again, when you connect that to, again, with that moral religious, that moral crusade aspect, and coupled with financial pipelines full of a ton of resources, this is what you want if you're going to take over a nation, right?
Right.
And they had it.
And it was so easy back then.
Yes. And so the question is, what do we do to reverse it? And I think one of the points that Sam Francis makes in one of his articles is that he talks about kind of historically the role of kind of the young conqueror. The way that Caesar was successful is not only did he win battle, but then he took the spoils of his battle and he paid off his soldiers. So conquering fueled the war that continued more conquering, right? Napoleon did this, et cetera, and et cetera. And so I think that's one of those aspects that if we're looking at, okay, how do we change the battleground of the current elite system? What are the spoils that we can give to our allies? And I think that's where like kind of the crypto issue is so big, because that is the financial revolution, where if you as for example, like as a populist movement, if you can fortify laws within your country, like what El Salvador has done, like what Wyoming has done, like what Estonia has done, if you can take your nationalist policies and use them to enrich a transformative financial product and a financial industry, well, then that is what can create a legion of financial elites that can support whatever religious crusade that you have going on. And again, so that's where, again, there's a lot of, it's fun seeing these people against Francis, Rothbard, Raimondo, et cetera, in the 90s, having these conversations that are playing out right now. And we don't need to just be, oh, we got new Rothbard, update the script, follow, as a Rothbard bot, but we should be able to appreciate it and try to apply it to the way we are now.
What was just for the sake of the show notes later, what exactly were the specific articles or books that you were referencing? So
the Franciscan Way is the article from the Rothbard report. It's up on my Substack there. The book he is reviewing is Beautiful Losers by Sam Francis. It's a collection of essays about the failure of American conservatism. What's kind of neat too is that it's written throughout different parts of I think it's over like a 12-year period. And so like Francis had the idea of Ronald Reagan being Caesar prior to like that being the Trump meme. And then Reagan wasn't Caesar. And so it's kind of interesting and that sort of dynamic. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can't have a Caesar like role in the future, but you get a little bit of that taste in there. And then the Raimondo book that includes an essay on Burnham and other conservative thinkers, kind of similar on the Francis line, is Reclaiming the American Right by Justin Raimondo, who was a man that died too early. But I also think it's this is why I think Jeff. I always love when Jeff Deist highlights the old right tradition. He just did a Human Action podcast on it. That there's some similarities, I think, with what Garrett Garrett and the old right viewed as the revolution within the form. You know, the FDR coup without it being a complete coup, right? You know, everything stayed the same, but the ideology of the entire governing structure had changed. I think those sort of insights, again, they're not narrowly libertarian. I think that they do fit kind of that true political science sort of analysis there. And Raimondo kind of builds on that tradition. That's something that is always in the background of Rothbard's work. And it's something that, again, I'm happy that the Institute's continuing to build on as well.
Yeah, that would, once I read the book by Kinzer about the Dulles brothers, and I realized both the founding ideology of the military-industrial complex, the sentiment that went into the building out of that apparatus, and then once I fully appreciated the extent to which, how would I say this? Coming from kind of, I was just sort of like a run-of-the-mill ANCAP that was all, starry-eyed about, in the Fed, and we're gonna, we're gonna reform the state and roll back the state and all these sorts of things, all these mottos. When I realized what that would entail, like realizing that 100 years ago, it was really easy for a small handful of college buddies who all worked for the same couple of law firms to essentially take over the entire American government, functionally speaking. You could still have the electoral side, the electoral front of it, that, there's partisanship back and forth and everything, but ultimately the actual praxis of the government, to use the buzzword, the actual praxis of the government was controlled by a small select group of people, and the government itself, in terms of dollars relative to the rest of the economy, and in terms of manpower, it wasn't nearly the massive sprawling beast that it is now. So, like, they got in on the ground level. You have FDR's efforts of essentially taking all functional power away from Congress and investing it into permanent bureaucracies within the State Department and elsewhere. And then you have all of these lawyers and spies and stuff that develop the spying apparatuses, and they had completely infested all of the American and even international media within the space of a decade or so. And from there, you had the massive explosion in expansion and growth of the government. And I realized that this is like, the analogy is overused, but it's a cancer. Like, you can't just go and just like pluck it all back and unwind it all. It's never going to happen.
The biggest defenders of all of these, voice of democracy and all of these international microphones that the State Department created during the Cold War, it was the neoconservatives that defended them. And these are the institutions that are now having gay pride flags on the embassy outside the Vatican and Black Lives Matter things. It's just the make the world safe for democracy is now, make the world safe for trans Black women. Right. But it's all the same, that's what neoconservatism and neoliberalism are really not that different. That all, it's just, they were just simply using the parties as WWE distraction domestically.
Yeah.
And that is why, like, they can't stand the populist right. That's why they always feared Pat Buchanan. And that's why it's precisely this paleo pre-neocon movement that terrifies them so much.
You guys are really making it putting me in a difficult spot where I was just sort of about to kind of corner Tho in his like take back the streets thing and inform him that we need to instead end the war on drugs.
Yes.
You're putting me in a real rough spot to hit that one now. Unfortunately,
there'd be so much of the homeless population would be starting tech companies if not for the war on drugs.
You're right. Maybe they could be the CEO of Twitter.
Yeah. I keep waiting for Cato to make the case for increased Haitian immigration, just because think of all the new food choices. Since I saw videos on Twitter about Haitians eating people, being barbecued.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Think of just think of the new delicacies you could capture downtown with some long pig, Haitian style.
This
we're all afraid of eating bugs, and it's actually going to be people.
I just realized that this was never about Burnham and Rothbard. Tho saw Jeff on the show, and he's like, "Oh man, I can get on there and really go for it too. Probably can't have that guy one up me."
he set the bar.
Yeah. All right. Well, you said you had a heart out, and it's
I'm gonna be joining Jeff here in a second. So, but thank you guys. Always a fun time. Keep up the great work.
Yeah, thank you, man. Where can people follow you? Where do you want to send people to?
Yeah, if you want to read this article, you can find it at rothbardrockwellreport.com. And then you can find me at Twitter at ThoBishop. And
you mentioned a Substack also, no?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's the Rothbard Rockwell Report is. The
that's
Substack.
your.
And
okay,
so yes, if you just go to that URL, it'll take you directly there to the first
okay.
article, and you can subscribe from there.
Sorry. Yeah, that's very exciting. Okay,
excellent,
lovely.
It was good to have you, man. We'll have you back on again here soon, so we can talk about homeless people some more.
Excellent. I'll always look forward to it. Later, guys.
All right. Talk to you later, buddy.
See you. Tell Jeffy I said hello. But I'll just put it on Twitter since he follows me there. It's easy enough. Okay.
Oh, what's that? Jeff Deist follows you?
Yeah, on Twitter.
Oh wow, yeah, that's got to feel good. Yeah, I remember.
Well, he doesn't follow a lot of people.
I remember several months ago when he followed me. That felt really good then too.
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
You know what else feels good?
Yep.
Feels real good when I pop into my mouth one of these strawberry lemonade CBD gummies, premium THC free CBD gummies from PalomaVerdeCBD.com. High quality CBD product from a high quality man and woman, Carlos and Vanessa Abelar, with their recent addition. They've got a beautiful little family, and they've got their family owned business that is spreading good stuff to the world. So if you guys want to also feel good, just before we started this show here, I popped in a little gummy in my mouth there and had a little goodness, and I can feel the kind of happy little tingly warmth going throughout my body as I couldn't tell whether it was the CBD gummy or whether it was hearing Tho's dulcet tones in my ears, but you could just do both. You could just pop a gummy and then go listen to Tho over and over again, and you could experience it as well. So if you guys want some great CBD products, if you don't take CBD already, if you aren't already using it, then I would highly recommend it, especially if you have any sorts of issues with focus or concentration or sleeping well or chronic pain or anxiety, stress, all of those sorts of things. It's not obviously it's not a cure-all. It's not a wonder drug, and we're not claiming that it is, but it is a wonderful substance to consume. It's very natural, non-psychoactive. It's not going to get you high. Amy says I took a gummy when I had a migraine the other night and then took a hot shower. I was a different person afterwards. Yeah, Amy gets like, I get migraines where I have like a really bad headache and I'm knocked out for the day. She gets crazy migraines where I think they're called oral migraines. It's AURAL, where she like loses sight in one eye and gets all kinds of weird stuff happening to her. So she took one the other night and she definitely felt better afterwards. So I strongly recommend it if you don't already take it, and if you do use CBD already and you're looking for a good supplier, then we've got you covered. PalomaVerdeCBD.com. You can use promo code KING to get 25% off any order over $75. And if you do that, then you will be supporting our capitalist venture to make money by entertaining you with interesting words and fascinating, brilliant guests like Tho Bishop. And you'll also be supporting a great small business and putting food directly into the mouths of two beautiful young girls. So PalomaVerdeCBD.com, use promo code KING. Also, Steven, what's your favorite place to go on the internet?
Oh, Twitter right now is fucking lit. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Wow. Well, okay, what's your second favorite place?
I like Facebook.
Yeah. Most people don't know about it. Most people don't know about Facebook, but it's actually it's another small family-owned business they're really on the up and up. They're also on the upswing. They're growing like a weed, and pretty soon I think we actually might be able to start building an audience there. Perhaps we're happy to support Facebook, and it used to be YouTube. Once upon a time, if you were listening to the show several months ago, you would know that YouTube was one of our favorite they didn't even pay us. We were just glad to advertise for them and encourage people to sign up and give them $15 a month. Well, now you can go to Facebook.
That's right. New sponsor of the show, Mark Zuckerberg. Be sure if you don't have an account to get your Facebook account with just an email and password, I believe, and then they'll ask you some questions at facebook.com and use promo code KING.
Remember when you used to do the ad reads for Mudwater? That's a callback. Anybody who gets that one, they've been listening for a long time.
Yeah, you've been listening for a while, and it might be on one of the 3 podcasts. One of my favorite things that I saw something like someone commented somewhere. I think it was maybe during the Charlemagne stream where we had kind of some new people. Just something along the lines of like, am I correct that the podcast only has 3 episodes or something like that? Yes, you are.
You are correct. Yeah.
You are indeed correct.
That reminds me, actually, I had someone reach out to me. It was like a month ago. I just remembered it now. I had somebody reach out to me and offer to get all the rest of our audio shows uploaded. And I was like, yeah, that would be an awesome deal. And then promptly completely forgot about it. So I need to I think make a note of this. I need to reach out to him and get that done so that people, it's kind of like our audience has sort of kind of reached like it hasn't grown in a long time. And I think a large reason for that is that we've kind of maxed out the number of people who are interested in watching rambling hours long videos on YouTube. So maybe we need to bust out, get rid of this glass ceiling.
I mean, for me, the thing is, it's kind of like, the people who are just like, hey, do you guys have, a podcast? It's like, yeah, it's on you. Just go to YouTube. And it's like, no, I want to listen just to the words. I don't want to see anything. I don't want to use YouTube. I guess it's like those like hipsters that only want to listen to music on vinyl or like 45s or something. It's like, okay.
Yeah. I think it's probably it's a roundabout way of them saying that we have faces for radio, I think.
Yeah, maybe.
Like you have to get what's the point of us looking the same if you don't look at us while you're listening to us?
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff with the Josh Rayner episode, like, I mean, what would even be the point of listening to that other than to just, like, torture yourself that you don't have YouTube to get all the visual humor? But of course, Matthew was setting me up, and we did a little bit of a bit here. My favorite place on the internet, as I've said since before that they were a sponsor, is the Nomad Network. And I don't see how you could possibly listen to the show and not know what the Nomad Network is, but is basically a home for digital entrepreneurs. I view it as a knowledge base as well as a refreshing place to interact on the internet. So kind of like moving forward, it's pretty clear that people sort of need to find their people, need to find their communities. And it's also becoming clear that it's not always a physical community. Physical is great, but the more people that you can kind of connect with around the world, you get more options. I have a buddy who is in Guam and just joined it, I think, a few weeks ago, because he was like looking for some guidance on how to sort of set up like a digital business out there. Anyhow, if that sounds at all appealing to you, and I don't know how it wouldn't, if you visit www.nomadnetwork.app/king, you can sign up for free. And, probably heard me say it before, but thanks to one person in particular in there named Brian, I got set up with a business plan within like 10 minutes. I was able to start like working on this business plan. And within like a month and a half, was at like 75% of the goal that I wanted to reach for monthly dinero. So, I don't know. It just kind of speaks for itself. I would head on over there. Whatever stage you're at, I'm sure there's someone out there that can make your life better. Or you can offer your help to other people as well. So that's www. Don't forget those W's. That's the real promo code, is the 3 W's. .nomadnetwork.app/king.
James says, my case for audio. I don't want to sit at my desk for hours to watch a stupid YouTube video. I have to get up and make dinner in half an hour. Come on, James. Stop being poor. Just pay for YouTube Premium. That's what you have to do.
Use promo code KING. Promo code Zuckerberg. Say it's a same thing.
What's up, Cooper? How are you fellas doing today? How are you doing today, Stephen?
I think I'm fine. I was definitely anticipating talking to Tho for a couple days. But like I feel like now that has happened, it's sort of just like it's looking forward to like the rest of the week now.
Yeah.
That was like a big line of demarcation for me.
Oh, maybe we should let people know that our recording schedule is likely going to be shaken up going forward. Our good friend Stevie Boy here is has just been constant. I just can't get him to stop whining and complaining about
Yeah, I'm
how
whining.
busy he is on Mondays.
Very busy on
And
Mondays.
so so I guess I'm so fed up listening to him whine about how busy he is that, you know what, we're just not even gonna record on Mondays anymore.
That's right. No more Mondays. Ever.
But yeah. So
unless we have to, in which case it's fine.
Yeah. we're looking at probably shaking it up and going to Tuesday, Friday. I thought about maybe Tuesday, Thursday, but I like the idea of having it be kind of spaced out as much as possible. So it's not like two really close together and then really far apart.
Yeah.
And then we're also going to be doing, I've got a growing list of guests here that I'm going to be reaching out to and having some interesting conversations with people.
Right.
And
James Burnham will be on the show next week.
Right. Yeah. Steven just bought a Ouija board and but yeah. So just so you guys know, going forward, expect, I think this week we'll probably do Monday and Thursday like before, and then going forward we'll be switching up to Tuesday and Friday, and then occasionally, sometimes I think it'll probably just be on a whim, but sometimes we'll do the guests just live, like on a normal show, like we did today. And then maybe sometimes we'll do them just for the supporting listeners group. Which, speaking of, if you'd like to join the supporting listeners group, you can go to subscribestar.com/kingpilled and hop in there. Over the weekend, I always get, especially on Sundays. Sundays end up being a really, really long day, and I get basically no time spent at all on my phone. And it seems like Sunday is the day that everybody goes crazy in the supporting listeners group and starts talking. Like, so I just get notifications all over, and then I go look in there and I say, there's all these threads that I got to keep up with, because I will not miss a single message in there. I don't care where it's posted, what thread it's posted in. I'm going to read every single one of them. So, I've made that commitment. So yeah, so they I haven't been in there in a couple days now, but I got to go in as soon as we finish the show here. I'm going to go in and
I've been
reply to
clipping
all
up
the lovely people.
Like portions of the managerial revolution that has some quotes in it that are pretty interesting, because I referenced some of the stuff last show, and I was kind of surprised that not everyone had read it. When it comes to supporting listeners, I always kind of presume that they've read every book that's ever been in existence. But there's some quotes in there that I was going to toss in the in the general section.
Did you have any particular thoughts you wanted to get into about what's been going on Twitter lately, or do you want to save that for whenever we could get Tho on again?
Oh gosh, well, who's to say when we can get Tho on again?
He's a busy man.
Yeah, I guess I so obviously we're referencing. I was going to think of something that we weren't referencing, but I'm out of those ideas. So this is the one thing that I know for sure is if there's ever a discussion that you're involved in with Mr. Smith and it turns into an argument, and if ever he invokes his daughter, he brings his daughter or his girls, or you just step away from the phone. Doesn't matter, wrong or right. Just get the fuck away from your Twitter keyboard. Log out. You still have time. But if you keep engaging, I don't know why you would do that, because you're just going to get nuked. You're going to be just unpersoned on Twitter.
When Dave mentions his daughter, that's the sign that he's about to go nuclear, huh?
Yeah, and it's just like it's like when a rattlesnake gets like the tail going. That's how you know. But yeah, Dave was responding to I like what Dave's doing on Twitter these days. For the most part, I would say it feels like he's like he piggyback on what Tho was saying with the Rothbard article about unleashing the cops or whatever, which I don't think I don't want anyone to think that I'm under the presumption that just unleashing the cops by and large on a grand scale is what is going to get rid of any of the problems that may be present on your streets. As I experienced firsthand, I'm very keen to talk about. I had the realization present itself to me a couple of years ago on the street, that the cops were not the fantasy of that the right wing kind of holds them to be. But yeah, he quote tweeted it, and I don't know if he was doing it on purpose, to sort of like just kind of call out like libertarian jerk offs to make asses of themselves, but that's certainly what ended up happening.
Yeah.
and he wasn't shy. He wasn't shy about featuring them. And
it's like he put out the bat signal for libertarian dorks.
He made everyone's day and says, "I'm done with the loser brigade." And it's just like, I just wanted to use them for this, that, and the third, and then they're all blocked now and whatever. And so it kind of seems like, it just seems like people could not resist getting in line just to be the new loser brigade. Just to get embarrassed on Twitter. And it's just, I'm watching them, and they're just not stopping. They just kind of keep going, which is, Lord knows there's no shortage of them.
And if you listen to them, they think that they're like patting each other on the back, we're mocking all the statists.
Yeah. I mean, my sort of practical interpretation of that whole thing is just like, I mean, like there's a lot of should, and I just try to scrape away the should from everything. So yeah, I mean, I understand the point of view that people are kind of saying that there's areas of the country that are just sort of overrun with homeless people and crime and everything. So the police, if we're gonna have a police force, they should handle this. And that, my non-Lulbert take is that, we know that they don't. And ironically enough, the only place where really something like that is actually likely to work is a place where there's less of a problem to begin with. Which kind of, like, if you just kind of, and I'm with the sentiment behind the idea of unleash the police, and kind of, I'm Dave, if you ever see this somehow, I want you to be at whatever playground you want with your daughter. I want you guys to have a great time. Leave me alone on Twitter. But yeah, like that sentiment, and I think that's the important thing to sort of like suss out on Twitter is if people are able to like appreciate that sentiment or not. But in terms of like an actual practice, it's like, man, unleashing the cops in New York City these days, or in whatever major metropolitan area, it's the institutions that are in control are not the kind that are going to have them doing anything that you want. So with that, if you know that, and you kind of know that it's more likely to work in a smaller rural community, and then in the smaller rural community, also there's probably less of a problem to begin with, and you probably can freely, with or without a police presence, enjoy a park with your son and daughter. That kind of pushes you towards, okay, well, what am I doing in this major metropolitan area? You know what I mean? It just kind of forces you to take a look around and just kind of say, it's like, man, have we taken an L here? I think we've taken an L. Maybe we, and that's also the thing with the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. It's like when people were talking about, and again, I appreciate everyone's, idea of like defending property, and there shouldn't be riots, and, civilians should be able to thwart these destruction of property if the police aren't going to do it. And then, but when people are kind of saying he was defending his community, my only issue with that statement is that it's just like, it very clearly was not his community. And I don't mean geographically. I mean that, he did something that was pretty reasonable by all measures, and was on trial for murder. So it's just like, if you behave like that, and so, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of people could have told him, like, hey, buddy, I understand what you're trying to do, but if anything goes fucking sideways, you are going to come out on the shit end of it in some way. And even if he got found not guilty, I mean, that's like he still came out on the shit end of it. Like he shouldn't have been on trial. He shouldn't have been turned into like a public enemy. And so just the idea, if you look at it, it's just like, does that look like the people who are sort of in charge of the community recognize this as Kyle Rittenhouse's community? It doesn't look like it to me. You know what I mean? So
that's a like, really good observation.
That battle was lost like a while ago. And so I think, I don't know, Cyprian had that thing a while ago about like the zombie apocalypse and the whole bit. Independent of anything viral related, like sometimes the move is to like retreat and like collect, and get your shit together. You know what I mean? And,
right.
You just got to know that even if you fight valiantly, you're gonna take an L. If you're prepared to take an L, you just want to take an L, then sure. But like if you're looking to sort of make the most liberty for yourself or whatever you want to say, then it might need to be more tactical. So.
There's I think my favorite tweet on this whole thing is I just saw it just when we went live here from John Miles. His name on Twitter, he's at PrivatizeEDU. That guy's good takes. He said, libertarians, parents removing homeless from parks because of their children is tyrannical and wrong. Also libertarians, the homeless removing children from the parks is okay because of homesteading and Lockean property rights. That's probably my favorite take from this whole thing. Second in all of it was something from Tho Bishop himself. He said, he quote tweeted Dave. Dave said, I thought I was clear, but I was asking specifically about the issue of homeless people taking over city blocks, parks, playgrounds, and other government property. This is not a hypothetical. It's real. What do you propose we do right now? Still haven't heard anything on that. And Tho said, there's a toxic quality some libertarians have that views issues like homelessness as a rightful consequence of failing to pass some sort of YIMBY rule change or other preferred policy.
Can you tell me what that means?
What?
What that YIM?
YIMBY?
Yeah.
It's my understanding of it is so NIMBY with an N is not in my backyard. So okay. It's the attitude of like I don't want this stuff around. It's usually typically like something attributed to like bougie white people, kind of. They're NIMBY people. So YIMBY is like yes in my backyard. It'd be the opposite of that. So he said they care more about ideology in the abstract than the well-being of their neighbor. And I said I'd forgotten that he'd said that, and I basically kind of restated what he said. Yesterday, I said, if you care more about your theoretical principles than your actual neighbors, you're probably a libertarian. And that's like, this was something. Oh, here you go too. My wife is, if I tweeted half the great things that she says, I would have a lot more followers.
Tell her to message Andrew and she can sell them probably.
Yeah, Andrew won't hesitate to take them. She said libertarians are communists with self-esteem issues. But really what has stood out to me with this whole thing is not so much the specific issue itself, but what it reveals about the psychology of the people who are debating this. If you encounter a phenomenon where, for example, you have a parent who wants to take their child to the park, and in going to that park, they discover that there's homeless drug addicts sleeping around inside the park that's designed for children. And your response to that is, number one, well, this is the responsibility of the state, and we need to get rid of the war on drugs, and we need to end the Fed, and we need to, like, these are the ways that we solve this problem. If your response, like, number one, that just reveals that you've just completely divorced yourself from reality altogether.
Or that you're very in tune with the idea of how to get more Twitter followers.
Sure, yeah, more Twitter followers from a very niche group, yeah. But then, beyond that, though, like if you encounter that situation where there's a parent with their child and they want their child to go play on a playground, and what they're encountering is something that's like distinctly a threat, distinctly dangerous and unhealthy for their child to be exposed to. And your response to that is that the parent with their child are somehow the aggressors, or they're somehow the maybe not that they're the aggressors, but that there's some sort of equity between them. That the homeless bum who wants to shoot up and sleep in the park, and the parent whose child wants to play on the playground, that these are somehow equal in this scenario, and they need to be treated as equal. And you're gonna react to the person saying, "Get these bums out of the playground so my child can play on the playground that's designed for children to play on it." If your response to all of that is to insult, dismiss, mock, or treat as some sort of hostile aggressor those parents, it just reveals a really, really distinct lack of humanity.
That feeling when libertarians accidentally participate in bio-Leninism.
Right.
With the drug addict.
Yes. Somehow the drug addict needs to be painted as a victim. And perhaps the drug addict is a victim of something.
Sure.
Of course, sure they are. We can all frame anybody as being a victim of something. But ultimately, if your society, if your conception of society treats the homeless bum drug addict and the child who wants to play on the playground as equal participants in the society, your conception of society is broken. I don't see any way around that. And ultimately, the other tweet I had about this last night, what this really gets at is, I said libertarians want libertarianism to become de rigueur, but they aren't willing to either, one, take power and enforce it, or two, actually care about the values and desires of the people who are supposed to embrace their ideas. Like, how is libertarianism supposed to become the standard ideology, or how is libertarianism supposed to become in vogue, or somehow develop influence within the society, if you aren't willing to care about the people who are supposed to sign on to your ideas, and you're not willing to just say, screw what they think of it, I'm just going to take power and enforce it? Those are the only two ways that your ideology is ever going to hold any sort of sway. Now, I would say that I'm open to ideas about taking power and enforcing it. I don't have a hard and fast conclusion that I've drawn about that particular strategy. I'm willing for somebody to make a case to me about it. But at the very least, you have to recognize, from a pragmatic standpoint, even not even from a moral or ethical standpoint, but just from a pragmatic standpoint, if your goal is to make libertarianism more popular, then is it more useful to appeal to the homeless drug addicts or to appeal to the parents of children? Which group of people is going to better serve your goal of advancing the cause of liberty? So there's just, it's just wrong on so many levels. It's wrong on a pragmatic level. It's wrong on an ethical level. It's wrong on a being a human level. It just, yeah. Someone was in my notifications saying something to me about, like, as soon as he realized that I didn't have a, what did he say here? He said, your critique of libertarians became tiresome once I realized you don't actually have a better way to advance liberty. And I just said, thank you for picking up on the fact that I think advancing liberty is vapid, masturbatory, lolbert horseshit. No, I don't care about advancing liberty. I care about my family. I care about the people I care about. I care about them thriving. And until I can ensure those things, and until I can secure my own wealth and my own prosperity and that of my family, and ensure that I'm passing on something for my children, the rest of the people in the society, they don't matter. I can't be the person who takes care of every person in the society. I'm not interested in coming up with a solution for everyone.
For all Matt cares. Yeah. They may as well just go shoot up horse.
Shoot up horse. Shoot up ivermectin. And I know that there's going to be people who are going to come back and say, oh, well, you're saying that you have to care about people. Now you're saying you don't care about anybody else. No, I'm saying I care about the people I'm supposed to care about. You're not supposed to care about every single person. You're not supposed to try to solve the problem of every single person. That's narcissism masquerading as empathy. You're supposed to care about the people to whom you have a responsibility. And that starts with, number one, yourself, and then your family and your local community. Amy made a really good point. She said, libertarians are talking about how homeless people would be handled in their utopian society. And she's like, why are there homeless people in your utopian society? That doesn't. Yeah. I like how we said in our last episode that we weren't going to.
Yeah, but this is fun though.
It is, yeah.
And if you want, and if you want to contribute to some people who are looking to improve their own smaller communities, I'm positive that Matthew has something that he can share with you in mere moments.
That was smooth. That was very smooth.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I can't think of a way to segue that in. Okay, so I'll just read the copy here. So, calling all Hoppians, Praxians, and fans of late Rothbard, which we were just talking about late Rothbard. Mises GOP is here, and we need recruits for Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy. If you don't know what Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy is, then Google Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy and go listen to it or read it, whichever.
Yeah, not for nothing. I mean, I think, isn't there a live stream that people could check out where it was discussed by a couple pretty smart guys?
Yeah, there was. Yeah, go search for King Pilled. No, it wasn't on our channel. It was on Pete's channel, I think. Free Man Beyond the Wall. Pete and Andrew and I sat down and talked about it a few months ago, and we had a very interesting conversation about it.
I mean, is that something that could be like a part 2 one of these days on this channel? Is there enough to go around with those two gents?
I'm sure there probably is.
I think it would
why
be
don't
great. Why don't you tweet at Peter, and Andrew and tell them to come on the King Pill show?
Yeah, we don't have any way to get a hold of them, so if you guys could reach out to them for us,
that would be great.
That would be great.
That would be best.
Cooper says, if you don't know what Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy is, you might be a lolbert. He also said, this is a good point. He said, what I was saying about the not being focused on caring about your own, but trying to care about everybody else's business instead. He said that's a sign that the archetypal feminine is running our culture. It's the narcissism masquerading as empathy. That's what happens when you have feminine energy dominating the attempts at leadership within the culture. Ultimately, feminine energy is not designed for that sort of leadership or that sort of outreach. It just doesn't. It's a misuse of it. Feminine energy is meant to be directed at nurturing and caring for within the walls of the community, within the individual family. Not
you've got
everybody.
To clean your bloody room.
I knew that was coming. Anyways, okay, so Mises GOP is here, and we need recruits for Hoppa's What Must Be Done strategy to set out taking over local governments, nullifying the COVID regime, and starting us down a path to a private property society with the anti-tax. Stephen makes a good point with a lot of this. He said it. I don't know if it was in our group chat or where it was, but basically, number one, if your whole goal with this, if you're evaluating Manhattan and you're talking about public parks in the Bronx, you're never going to solve that problem. That's an
going to be some heroin shooting going down,
right?
In the Bronx.
Yeah, it's probably going to be shot into you
for a while. Yeah.
So if you actually care about these sorts of issues beyond just virtue signaling on Twitter, if you actually care about them, you actually want to solve them, start with your local areas, start with local governments. And if you don't have a competent, feasible local government, then move somewhere where there is one and get your family there and get away from these big urban centers. So the part of the What Must Be Done strategy involves taking over local governments. So the goal here is to start taking over local governments, nullifying the COVID regime, and starting us down the path to a private property society with the anti-tax. So Mises GOP needs candidates with good moral character in red areas of red states to step forward and answer their call to run. If you're someone who has good moral character and you're qualified and you've secured your own bag, you've got your family, you've secured yourself financially, you're in a good position to step forward and answer the call and accept leadership and be willing to sacrifice yourself and sacrifice what your sacrifice what you could be doing otherwise. If you're someone who's in that position and you're willing to do that, then reach out to go to GOP Mises on Twitter. That's the best way probably to get a hold of him. Or you can look at the link in the show notes here. Also, if you're someone who's interested in supporting candidates with good moral character, in supporting the anti-tax paradigm and interested in supporting the nullification of the COVID regime, then please become a monthly donor to Mises GOP today. No amount is too small. If you want to give a one-time donation, we ask that you break it into 12 equal parts, as this aids in our planning for the future. So again, there's a link in the show notes in the description of the video here, or you can go to gopmises.com and you'll find the link there as well. Good friend, Popular Liberty, good friend of the show.
Even if you live in some progressive hell and for whatever reason it's not in your interest to move, or you're just very lazy, it still is in your interest to have this kind of strategy be successful in smaller communities, because really it would take like one really kind of like making it happen where other areas start to like look at it, and even, I mean, because even some place like Miami, where that mayor is starting to do some kind of real wacky things that I would never have expected the mayor of Miami to experiment with, it just goes to show that like once these things work, they can spread to areas maybe that are even near where you are, where you could have a little enclave somewhere, and then you can still travel to your progressive hell urban center, and then kind of have like the best of both worlds kind of a thing. But donate to our friend Andrew. Gosh dang it, is the point.
That's right. And if you do that, then we'll make money as well. So you get to support the show, and you get to support something that actually matters.
That's
you get
right.
to support something that doesn't matter, and you get to support something that does matter.
That's right. I said that I was close to my goal, thanks to the business plan that was laid out for me in the Nomad Network, www.nomadnetwork.com/king. I didn't say I had achieved the goal, so Uncle Stevie Boy needs a little bit more Skrilla. So
help him out.
That's right, by donating to Andrew.
I'm just going to respond. So the guy that that had said that he found the whole thing tiresome once we realized we don't have a better way to advance liberty, he replied to my tweet, and I'm just going to answer him here so I don't have to try to type something out later. He asked,
you did it now, buddy, whoever you are.
He actually asked a sincere question. He said, what is your overall political goal then? Why engage with libertarians at all if you have nothing in common? I'm honestly trying to understand your point of view. By the way, if advancing liberty isn't the goal, is make people more free the goal? Is freedom not relevant at all? So first of all, the way that if we started defining terms here, if we started actually defining liberty, if we tried to agree on a definition for it, then I think it's more likely that we would agree on a definition of liberty than it is that we would agree on a definition of freedom. Ultimately, freedom is a Trojan horse. There was in the most recent Warlords Roundtable, we had a really interesting conversation about freedom, and a bunch of the guys in there who are smarter, better men than I, they were talking about fasting. They were talking about their fasting rituals, and one thing that I remember in particular, it was Kyle and Cooper both. They both agreed that in their experience, developing a really good fasting routine has become very liberating to them. And it seems counterintuitive. It seems counterintuitive that restricting what you can do, restricting your options, would count as freedom. That it would be liberatory. Seems like that would be the opposite. That you're getting less freedom. But what they found is that by what's happening. Oh, you have a lens.
Yeah, I wanted to see if I put up the webcam what would happen, but yeah, it was a real fucking dud. But yeah, I would. Yeah, man. Have you been fasting at all? Have you started getting with that a little bit?
Yeah, I've started intermittent fasting. So I'm intermittent fasted the last couple of days. And
yeah.
I'm right now, I think given my lifestyle habits and my given the way that I've been eating lately, I think if I went straight to fasting, I'd probably, at the very least, I would like disable my productivity capacity. I need to kind of ease into this, but I definitely have been, and I've been finding, there's a definite change now that yesterday, actually, on the way to church. So Saturday night, I last ate at probably, or my last calories were probably around 5 or 6 p.m., I think. And then I didn't consume anything except for some water until after church at probably 12 or 12:30. And my expectation, so I didn't have my morning coffee. I didn't have any caffeine. I didn't have kratom, which I usually have kratom in the morning a couple of times, probably by the time by noon. And then I haven't had any weed in probably about 10 days now. So my expectation was by the time noon rolled around, I was going to be dragging my ass to the car and like, give me caffeine, give
Yeah.
me food. And I actually was hitting a second wind. I was actually, I could keep going for a while here, but I'd set my mind on get to this point and then, then you eat and have some caffeine and all that. And so I just did. But to the point of freedom, freedom is not, there's this idea that freedom is like being free from obligations or being free from constraints, being able to do whatever you want to do. And that's not freedom. Or perhaps that is freedom and freedom is just a bad thing. You could look at it either way. I'm fine with either way. Ultimately, the idea of just being free from things, just being an atomized, isolated individual who's just entirely self-directed and at the whim of your own will, that's not a good thing. It's being sold as a good thing through the entire liberal project, of which libertarianism is the most concentrated ethos of. But yeah, Cooper says that kind of freedom is ultimately slavery. You're becoming a slave to your own will. You're becoming a slave to your own passions, to your own desires. Those are the things that are controlling you and directing you. Freedom, true freedom, when people say freedom, they're talking about like it's a word that substitutes for like the ideal state of man or something like that. That ideal state of man is when you have transcended those things. Freedom comes through discipline and through the fulfillment of your obligations. That's what freedom is. You're not going to find that through a political movement. You're not going to find that in a political party. The vast majority of people, I asked this when all this hullabaloo was happening on Twitter months ago. I was like, people say, well, we're going to spread liberty. Okay, well, do you have it? Because you can't spread something you don't have. And if the thing here is, well, we all have to work together to get it, now it sounds to me like you're trying to start a cult. And we all have to, we can't have this unless we all commit to it, unless we all work together on it. If you don't come join our movement, if you don't get in here, then none of the rest of us can have it. It sounds like this is like multi-level marketing or something. That's not freedom. Freedom is found through disciplining your will and fulfilling your obligations. And you're not going to be able to do that on your own. This is what's led me to orthodoxy. Because ultimately, you get into this circular thing where like you're trying to transcend yourself and you can't transcend yourself on your own. You can't. You have to find something. There has to be something outside of your system that enables you to transcend yourself. And I happen to believe and becoming convicted that that's Christ. That's what has led me to orthodoxy. And ultimately, once I started heading down this pathway, I just realized that all of this hullabaloo around these political parties and movements and social activism and all of that, this is all a bunch of activity masquerading as achievement. There's never a point where it's like, there, we accomplished it. There, we got there. We did it. There's no clear goals. There's no like definition, like liberty to a libertarian is something like the absence of the state. Okay, well, the state's never going to go away. So now what? Are we working for less state? So is it a state that's less funded or a state with fewer people in it? Or is it a state with less power? Because those are all different things. And if those are your goals, well, you're not going to accomplish that through a political party. So if you're getting involved in a political party claiming that your goal is to make people free or to advance liberty or whatever little slogan you want to give yourself, then you're just engaged in a process of self-deception. Because the political party is never going to do that for you. Now, there's some people, I know James Gentleman has said before that to him, being involved in the LP is a social program. It's like not a social program in the sense of like welfare, but like it's like a place where he goes to hang out with people that he cares about, that are friends and that are like-minded. Great. I have no problem with that. If you're doing it for the sake of socializing and having friends and whatever, cool. Knock yourself out. But that's not what these guys, like this guy who's talking to me, he's got hashtag Mises Caucus in his bio. The Mises Caucus is definitely not their goal is definitely not to have just a social organization where they just hang out and do stuff together. They're talking about having explicit goals, and they have all these things that they want to do. But those things are at odds with the idea of making yourself more free. Ultimately, I don't care about advancing liberty, because advancing liberty is a meaningless phrase to me. It doesn't mean anything to me. And I want to do something meaningful. I want to be involved in something meaningful. I want my life to change in a positive way, and as a consequence of that, I want the lives of people around me, the lives of people who are directly influenced by me, I want their lives changed in a positive way. I don't want my existence to be determined by the state and opposition to it. I want to live for something bigger and greater than that. And so he asks, what's your overall political goal then? I don't really give a shit what happens with politics. I can't control it. I want it to be better than it is. I don't want it to be worse. But I'm not going to be able to control that. All I can control is my own life. And once I have my own life under control, then I can control the life of my family. When I have the life of my family under control, then I can start trying to do something about my community. But particularly within libertarian organizations, the people who are involved in this activism are substituting that activism for actually getting their shit together. So my goal, if you want to call it a political goal, my political goal is to get people who care about what they call liberty to recognize that getting involved with the Mises Caucus, getting into a political movement, is tilting at windmills. It's a distraction. It's something that it's more than just like a passively unhealthy thing, or it's just something, it's not the greatest thing that you could do. It's actively harmful because it's taking you away from the things that matter the most. So my goal ultimately is to encourage as many people as possible to get out of political activism. That's it. That's the biggest thing. My goal is to get people out of political activism and get them focused on their own personal development, whether it's physical with diet and fitness, or spiritual, or educational. That's my biggest thing. And then I want to have fun doing it. I want to talk about things that I care about and focus on things that interest me with other people who care about the same stuff and who care about me, and I care about them. That's my goal. So there, I answered his question, and I'll just send him the link to this, and we can link to this at some point in the future if we need to.
Classic Matthew Erickson. Do you have a pithy answer for this? Yes. Here's a 2-hour podcast with no timestamp.
Right.
And see, fans, in 50 or 100 years or whatever, when people are talking about how all of everything that was going on from virus to Bitcoin to this, that, and the third is all just part of a battle between the Morgans and the Rockefellers, or whatever the alternative, the equivalent is going to be, you can say that you didn't waste your time getting involved in the minutia of the political formulas, which are totally not real, that were just being used at the time to pursue these ends of the different factions that are competing for power, wherever the hell is going on. And you could have started intermittent fasting and made your life better. Look at that.
And the real kicker in all of this is the people who do that, someone who's intermittent fasting is better equipped to actually take on state tyranny or whatever you want to call it than someone who's drinking, Mountain Dew and eating Doritos and playing video games and shit posting on the internet about the LP. It's like you're killing two birds with one stone if you start getting your own shit together. Because if you actually are someone who does care about, say, getting involved in local politics, if you're someone who does want to spend your time on that, you're going to be vastly more effective as someone who has their shit together, as someone who has a regular practice of prayer and exercising and has a good diet and it's intermittent fasting, all these different things. If you're someone who's doing that, you're going to be better equipped to actually make a positive difference. The thing is, most people who get to that point are going to realize that they're actually like backsliding by getting involved in political action. It's just not something for most people. The people for whom it is worthwhile, it's essential that they do it. It's essential that they be involved in it. Because as someone, I don't remember who it was, so I can't give you credit. I'm sorry, but I saw something. Someone tweeted at me. I can't remember who it was, but they said that good men who don't get involved. Good men who don't get involved with politics are consenting to be ruled by evil men, or something to that effect. I don't remember exactly how he said it, but it was something like that. I'm not saying that people should not be involved in politics. I'm saying that the people who should are so few and far between. There's so much the exception that you might as well just tell people that nobody should be involved in it. The people who should be involved in it, they know who they are. There's a very clear avenue for them to get involved and make a difference without compromising their own lives, without putting themselves in danger, without undermining their families, without, putting themselves at risk of some type. Those people it's very obvious when you're one of those people. The vast, overwhelming majority is not right for you. I thought you were about to say something. You're just going to cough.
yeah, just a lingering cough. Fans, are you guys having a cold go around where you are, where the cough just lasts forever? Goodness gracious.
I don't know. I don't really think that there's any sort of lingering bugs anywhere right now. Fortunately,
I have a lot of unprotected sex with gentlemen.
You're unmuted.
Oh, yeah. I love sexual intercourse with the ladies. It's the best. Yeah.
This is great. Mark says, I'm honestly living my best life right now, thanks to the Real King Pilled Show.
That's right.
Pretty soon we're going to have to just change the name altogether.
I'm very happy people are getting the name of the show correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of little things that you could do. Like how measurably different my life is when I'm cooking versus when I'm not cooking. Mm-hmm. It's just so simple. It's just one step to not feel useless. You just feel that you're capable of doing something. Taking control over something, and that just it goes from there. I think we've said it. It's sort of our catchphrase here: clean your room, get your own situation in order. It's a hashtag of the King Pill Show.
Yeah, something we coined that we're very proud of.
That's right, and we've been doing it for like months now, and so it's definitely ours.
Yep. I've seen lots of other people saying it too. I didn't realize that our reach is as extensive as it is. But
didn't want to say it, but
Joe Rogan, here we come. All righty. Well, you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's great. It was great to hear Tho give some perspective on Burnham. I'm going to finish that book now. And try to keep what he talked about in mind. And I'm going to keep looking on Liberty Twitter to see how this this little project that Dave seems to have going for himself is going to continue. It seems like he's just trying to slowly expose people. but as I with something I would have wanted to talk to Tho about. I don't know how comfortable he would have been talking about it, but I think there's a lot of people who look at Dave and just kind of see him as like, hey man, there's something about you where it's just like you're our people, you're too good for sort of the where you're at. Not to say there's not some great people over there in the whole bit, but there's something that people identify with Dave where I think even if he just kind of if he goes through this sort of Twitter exercise to the logical conclusion, it is just going to sort of leave him very well defined from the chaff. The problem is there's a lot of chaff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So it's almost like, man, just step away from the chaff,
Yeah, the chaff's going to catch on fire. You don't want
to.
Yeah,
the easiest thing is like this concept. I took one, like, I don't know why. I took like a Kenpo like private lesson one time with this guy. And the thing that like stuck out the most was just like he was trying to get me to stop him from choking me or whatever. I had to pay extra. I'm just kidding. But and then he's like, all right, move yourself away from me, and it was just like much easier. And like that lesson, I mean, I was like much younger, but like that really like stuck with me. And so it's kind of I just can't help but keep going back to like, it's like, man, if this Libertarian Party was called just like the Ooga Booga Squiddly Doodly Party or something like that, like, would you be so emotionally like attached to it? It's just a name, and then just, when you put an ideology on yourself, or you kind of limit yourself in that way, it can be kind of limiting with who you're conversing with and unintentionally like aligned with and affiliated with and stuff like that. But I am plenty happy to see people made to look like fools on Twitter and keep it going.
Especially when it's the right people. Yeah.
Oh, it's all the right people. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to, I'm not going to name names because I don't, number one, I don't feel like getting involved in drama.
Wait till the Friday streams. Wait till those Friday streams start going. Yeah. PDQ is going to come up on in here and spool up Matty Boy. There'll be some names. Let me tell you, fans.
I'll just say that Amy and I were talking yesterday, and we were mentioning specific names to each other, but we were like you have Dave, and then you have these people, and like
yeah.
Like how like how do you look at them and say, oh, this is the key here? If only more people were exposed to these people and what they have to say, that would be that just it's very good. Amy, I've got a thing up here for those who are listening on audio, the audio side. Amy made a comment, my beloved bride.
Right,
she said,
by the way.
She said, who knew that the thing that would bring Dave and the Posties back together would be one-shoot bums that openly masturbate in public on the Santa Monica Pier? And that's if that sounds very specific, that's because she's relating a very specific experience that she had.
Very specific.
And there are people that would have you believe that that guy laying there on the ground openly masturbating with one shoe on is actually the person who we need to lower the level of society to accommodate him. But yeah, we don't buy into that here. We're not interested in lowering the level of our society. We're interested in elevating it. So we appreciate you guys. Oh yeah, James Gentleman says by the way, y'all be sure to listen to LB Muniz on Lions of Liberty. He's also on Free Man Beyond the Wall this week. He has a thing. Let me get his link here real quick, because I want to make sure that people see this. He put a lot of work into this, and it's LB is a smart dude. He's got some really good takes, especially on this whole thing. People talked about, I don't remember who it was that said it first, but they said that that post-libertarian is a moment, not a movement. And I really liked how Adam Patrick defined post-libertarian. He said it's very simple. It's people who once called themselves libertarians and now they don't. So if you want to understand that better, if you want to get into some of the philosophy of it, then go to postlibertarianmoment.com and read what our good boy LB had to say about it. And then listen to him on Lions of Liberty, and then make sure you listen to him on Free Man Beyond the Wall this week. And follow him on Twitter. I'll give him a shout out here at the LB Muniz, the LB Muniz. And I think that's all we got here today. Thanks for showing up, folks.
Bye, ladies.
Subscribestar.com/kingpilled. Go join us there. We'll be, today's Monday.
Monday.
I don't remember if we have the Warlords Roundtable tomorrow or not, but either way, if you want to be involved in it, it's going to be a very good conversation. We also got a book club over there. We're going to be having our book club review here in the next couple of weeks, and then we've already got at least 2 of the books that we're going to be doing for the next month or quarter or however long it takes. And the books are the first one is Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. Second one is going to be Bronze Age Mindset, and I can't remember if we've already nailed down a third one or not. But if you're interested in having some accountability and reading some really interesting books and being able to chat about them with some good people, then you can do that over again at subscribestar.com/kingpilled and join the private Discord server. We'd love to have you there. All right. See you later, guys.